Why is shortstop pre-flop play one of the most important fundamentals? In online, tournaments, especially in online tournaments, which right now I'm assuming most of you are playing online, shortstop play comes up a lot. And as Jason just mentioned, especially the game, and as match structures progress, the blinds keep going, they get quicker, and we end up having to play a lot of 20, 15 big blind poker, and being the most proficient at those stacks is going to lead to a lot of high EV spots for you in the end game tournament. And most money is on the line. We're going to cover the biggest mistakes players make when playing on the short stack. There's a lot of mistakes people make when playing on the short stack. A lot of them, quite frankly, are kind of inexcusable mistakes from you see professionals make them, and I think it's a lot of a laziness, just not studying the stack size, a lot of pre-flop play. It's not the sexiest stack size to study. You don't get to do a lot of, check raise, barrel bluffing. It's a lot of the GTO play and solver play right now is more geared towards deep stack play, and the short stack play often gets forgotten. I believe in short stack play, there's the math side and also the feel, and it takes a lot of experience to gain the feel side of the short stack play. And a lot of the feel side has to do with knowing range, knowing population tendency, knowing how players react to certain actions. And frankly, this comes from experience and studying and realizing what pop is doing at certain spots. Finally, we're going to discuss various styles or a way to construct your strategy. I think a lot of people play high strategies, but they play the most basic, and they don't play strategies that maximize their EV. So we're going to talk about different ways that we can maximize our EV on the short stack in terms of pre-flop. We're not going to talk much about post-flop play today. In terms of the structure of the webinar, we're going to first cover raising first in when we're the first person to enter the pot. Then we'll discuss facing a raise first in when someone else has already entered the pot before us. We'll talk about some other considerations, and then we have a bunch of real game examples where we'll have our normal participation and some real examples from my recent online tournaments. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Raising first in 10 to 20 big blinds. Typical mistakes. First, players' RFI, which stands for raise first in, is way too tight. Players tend to open way too tight off of a 15 big blind stack, a 20 big blind stack, and they play way tight, and they're losing a lot of EV by missing a lot of plus EV opens. The strategy they're playing is making them money, but they could be making more money by playing more hands in a plus EV matter. This is my number 2 here is kind of my, what's the word I'm looking for? I call it laziness. Players avoid tough spots by open jamming 15 to 20 big blinds. So recent developments in poker software will give you where you can just load into a software. I have 15 big blinds in the hijack. Which hands can I go all in with? And players will just blindly follow this strategy, and they're going to make money doing that. But it's far, far, far from the highest EV strategy, because they're just taking a simple strategy that they know is going to make EV and avoiding tough spots that potentially can make them more EV. So like the best example of this would be like open jamming certain hands like king queen offsuit from the hijack for 15 big blinds. It's profitable to open jam the king queen, but could it be more profitable to just min raise the king queen or limp the king queen? There's other ways to play that are going to generate you a lot more EV over the long run. In terms of shoving, players shove 10 big blinds way too wide in early position. They shove 15 to 20 big blinds way too wide in late position, especially with weak ace-x hands. And this is mostly the players that are playing these all-in or fold strategies. And kind of avoid the tough spots and don't want to get, well, I don't want to min raise and get flatted and have to play a pot against the big blind. It's going to lead to tough spots. Well, if you want to make money, you got to get in some tough spots. And players don't raise fold enough or split ranges to maximize EV. So we're going to be talking a lot about splitting our ranges and how we go ahead and construct ranges in order to maximize EV. So first off, raising first in with 10 to 20 big blinds, we have to tighten up our ranges. So we'll consistently hear the term our raise fold gap. And the raise fold gap is the percentage of the time we raise and fold to an all-in behind us. So simply how often we raise and we fold. And the simplest example of this would be on the button when we have 60 big blinds. A GTO strategy is going to be raising about 54% of our hands. With 20 big blinds, that GTO strategy roughly is going to drop to around 35% or even less hands. And so we're folding about 19% more hands on the button. Now, this 35% doesn't include some hands that we're just going to open jam with, or maybe a GTO strategy includes some limps. But the main concept is that our raise first in is going to be much lower on 20 big blinds than 60 big blinds. And when we get down to 15 big blinds, it lowers even more to about 31%. In summary, if we raise too many hands, like 54% when we have 60 big blinds, the blinds can simply go all in with almost any two cards, and we will not be able to call enough, and therefore we're going to be overfolding, and the blinds will be printing money if they are simply just going all in with any two cards. Yes, Matthew, when I say raise folding, I mean open raising and then folding to a 3-bet. That is correct. In terms of sizings, in general, we're going to use either a min raise, a minimum raise to 2x, 2 times the big blind, or an all-in sizing. And we're going to be splitting our ranges. And we'll be talking about that in a second, what I mean by splitting our ranges. Limping can also be executed and is part of a GTO strategy at short stacks. We're not going to cover limping a lot today because it becomes a little more complicated. It's harder to execute at a correct frequency. I use limping a lot in an exploitable way on the short stack, but limping is actually a good thing when we are playing 15 to 20 big blinds, especially in late position. The reason is that limping allows us to play more hands. And when we're playing more hands, that means that we are gaining more EV, because if the EV was less than 0, we would simply fold because we don't want to be losing money. So the EV being higher than 0, we want to play as many hands as we can with an EV higher than 0. Couple questions. You can exploitably use 2.5 or 3x sizes if we feel it is right based on exploits, but I personally don't. And what tournament structure are we assuming? How does this change when 10 to 20 big blinds is the common stack for the majority of players? Simply, it doesn't. It's all about effective stack sizes, and I will play these strategies regardless in terms of the tournament structure. If there's one 20 big blind stack, or if everyone's a 20 big blind stack, it will affect a little bit when we talk into how later on when we talk about some other things. Later on, I have a slide for little adjustments that could come in. If everyone has 20 big blinds, then we would probably a higher edge to take, versus if we're the short stack with 20 big blinds, we could kind of take any edge want. So when I say the term split ranges, what I'm referring to is instead of going on with all our hands or raising every hand to 2 big blinds, which is kind of the standard you're taught, you should do the same with all your hands pre-flop as to not give away the strength of our hands. We're not going to do that on the short stack. It's going to be the highest EV strategy for us to raise 2 big blinds and call an all in with our strongest hands, and then raise to 2 big blinds and fold our weakest hands, mostly ones that contain good blockers, and then we're going to shove all in for the entire stack with the middle of the range that is A, weak to raise and call an all in, or B, too strong to raise and fold to an all in. And we're going to have some examples that will make this a little bit clearer. So let's take a look at an example range. And these ranges that we're going to look at are the 15 big blind raise first in from pokercoaching.com. So you guys all have access to these ranges. If you go under, I believe it's tools, and it will say 15 big blinds implementable ranges. And this is what that PDF is going to show. And these are GTO solutions for how to play as the raise first in with 15 big blinds. So we're going to take a few looks at these and see the differences and how it changes with positions. So the first note I want to take to point out here is under the gun and under the gun +1. So this is a 8-handed table, it looks like. So hijack, low jack, 9-handed table. So in the first two positions, we have no all-ins. We're only raising with 15 big blinds. And if you think about it logically, it makes sense. We don't want to risk 15 big blinds, and we still have 8 other players to act behind us. We're risking a lot of chips when there's still so many people act behind us. And I see this constantly, even from good regs online. I see it live. People shoving all in for 15 big blinds, shoving all in for 20 big blinds from under the gun 1. And that is, I don't know, I call it laziness, but it's what I was talking about earlier, that concept of, well, I know it's profitable to just shove you for 20 big blinds, so I'm going to do that. And it's much more profitable to just put that raise in for 2 big blinds and play accordingly. First, you get to play more hands. Obviously, if you're risking 15 big blinds, you have to play much tighter. You can't go all in with as many hands. And so when you play more hands, you're going to be gaining more EV by playing more hands. That's the first case. The second case is people are going to make more mistakes. When you move all in, people will get to play pretty perfectly against you. Yeah, people are going to call too wide or too tight. But in general, you don't get someone to make a mistake when you have, say, pocket jacks and they flat 5-6 suited from the cutoff with 15 big blinds, which is a huge mistake. And they're just going to call. And you are gaining so much EV, more EV, by just raising and not having a shoving range from early position. So a couple questions here. I'm going to go ahead and name those. Are the all-in hands selected random? No, not at all, and we'll get into the all-in hands in a little bit. How do I calculate these for my own range? Well, I'll be covering the all-in spots in a couple minutes, but in general, they're going to be the middle of our range, not the top or the bottom. And yes, Robert, the under the gun and +1 raise size is, all these raise sizes are 2 big blinds unless it's the all. So under the gun +1, pretty easy strategy. It's not a split strategy because we're just raising to 2 big blinds with every hand. We don't have an all in, and we're 3 big blinds. We're not raising to 2.5. It's just the same strategy with all hands. So it's a uniform strategy. Obviously, under the gun, we're about 17%. Under the gun +1, we're about 19%. You guys look at these ranges. We don't need to go through all of them. Under the gun +2. So this is 1 off the low jack. I call it under the gun +7, or under the gun 7. So it's under the gun at a 7-handed table. That's how I refer to it. I think it's easier to notate that way. You start to see the beginnings of our split strategy. So we have a few all-ins now. Ace jack, queen jack suited, king jack suited, king 10 suited, and pocket sixes. And the reason these specific hands is, remember what I said before, with right here, too weak to raise and call an all in, or they're strong to raise and fold. So jack suited, king 10 suited, queen jack suited. These hands are put in a really bad spot if we raise to 2 big blinds and then someone goes all in over the top. We either then are going to be folding a hand with a lot of equity, or we're going to be calling against a range that dominates us. So instead, we'd rather shove with king jack suited, king 10 suited, and queen jack suited, and then this ace jack and sixes. And there's specific properties that you'll see with a lot of the shoving hands. So king 10 suited is the easiest example to explain this. And this is a property that you will see a lot with these middle range shoves. When we go all in with king 10 suited for 15 big blinds, if you're in the cutoff, let's say, for example, so we're under the gun 7 and we have king 10 suited, and we go all in for 15 big blinds. We'll just say you're on the button. If you're on the button with king jack offsuit, what are you going to do? If I go all in onto the gun 7, and you have the button and 15 big blinds versus my shove now, what are you going to do with king jack offsuit? Yep, Anthony's right. You're going to be folding king jack offsuit, and you should fold king jack. And that's the property that is really important with a lot of these shoves. You're going to be shoving hands that get dominated hands to fold. So a hand like king queen and ace 10 offsuit are going to fold when we go all in for 15 big blinds. And so, and you can't just start calling with king jack because we're shoving king 10 suited, because we're also shoving the ace jack offsuit here. And we have 6s in there because that's our worst pair that we've decided is too weak to raise call, but too strong to raise fold. So this is the beginning of a split strategy, and you're going to see it expanded as we get closer to the button. It's going to become more clear. Doesn't your table image play into these early position shoves? I'm not a huge believer in table image. It's more just what ranges are you playing, what perceived ranges are you playing. These are GTO ranges, so these are the computer ranges. If you're playing against each other, these aren't meant to be blind copied, but you make your adjustments off of these ranges, and that's what we'll be talking about later. So here in the low jack, you start to see the same types of hands we're going all in with. You're starting to see a pattern here. So we min raise with our really strong hands, aces, king, ace, queen, ace, jack, ace suited, king, queen suited, kings, and ace, king, and pocket 7s are better. Those are our strong hands, so we're going to be raise calling. And then the hands that we're going to be raising holding are ace 7, ace 6, ace 5, some of these suited aces, suited 9s, suited offsuit Broadway hands. Those are going to be our raised folds. And then the hands in the middle are the hands we all in with ace, jack, ace, queen, king, queen. So our best offsuit hands. And then a lot of these suited Broadways, king, jack, king 10, queen, jack, jack 10, ace 9, and then 5s and 6s. Again, we're raising with our best hands. We shove with these middle hands in the red, and then we raise fold these other hands on the outside. Again, in the hijack, here it's even more clear. In the hijack now, all these better suited aces are enough to call off. Maybe like ace 6 and ace 7, I think we're probably raised folding. And coming with all these Broadways, king, jack, king 10, queen, jack, queen 10, jack 10, 6s, 5s, 4s, our best offsuit aces. King, queen is now strong enough to raise call. And then we'll be raised folding like king, jack, queen, jack, 10, these types of hands. So again, our range is split into 3 different parts: raise fold, raise calls, lens. Cutoff, even more clear. And then on the button, we shove with all of our offsuit aces because we like to just win the pot now and deny equity. We're shoving with all our offsuit Broadways. Now hands like king 10 suited are strong enough to raise and then call an all in. And we shove with our worst pair because we want to get hands like jack 10 to fold. Ace 5 suited to fold. So I'm going to go through a couple notes, and I'll answer a few of the questions. So suited connectors is the first thing. We are open folding hands like 7-6 suited on the button. So if you looked here on the button, we're not raising 7-6 suited, 6-5 suited, 5-4 suited. We instead prefer to raise like king 9 offsuit, king 8 offsuit, queen 9 offsuit. The reason is they have better blockers to the types of hands that are going to go all in against us. So we're blocking a hand like king queen or king jack, pocket kings, pocket 9s, pocket. We're blocking hands that are going to go all in, and it's more likely we see the flop. Versus when we raise with 6-5 suited, it's more likely they're going to have higher cards that can just go all in, and we're raise folding then. Small pairs are often just open jam cut off on the button. So you see here, deuces through 6s on the button, deuces through 7s in the cutoff, 4s, 5s, jack. We just want to shove all in with these small pairs for 15 big blinds. And the main reason is we get hands like jack 10 suited now has to, 10-9 suited has to fold, 9-8 suited is folding, maybe 6 offsuit. We're folding hands that have 50% equity against, and so we'd want to go all these pairs to deny equity to hands that would otherwise call a min raise. And then if you look, we're just simply open folding a lot of these small pairs. So in the hijack, we're just open folding deuces and threes. We're in the cutoff, we start shoving them. So a lot of the time, these deuces and threes under the gun, we're folding deuces, threes, fours, and fives. So we're folding a lot of these small pairs. The raise fold range is focused around offsuit broadways. The key point is that we're blocking the reshoving range of the opponents. So if you look here in the low jack, a lot of our raise folds come from ace 9 off, ace 10 off, king 10, king jack, queen, queen. Same thing in the hijack. In the cutoff, we're starting to just shove king, king, jack, and now they're queen, jack, king 10, queen 10, jack 10, king 9. So a lot of these offsuit broadways are going to be part of our raise fold range. And so that's what I'm talking about with the split range. The key concept, again, is you're going to shove the hands in the middle range. They're too weak to raise, too strong to raise fold, and have enough equity still when they get called that they're doing fine in an all-in scenario. So none of these are bad hands we're shoving with. They're hands that generate more EV by shoving than just raising to two big blinds. And go ahead and answer a couple of these questions in the chat. Matthew, should we really open 5-5 under the gun 1 or under the gun 2? Fold it. No. You see some weird things like this on the fringe hands in GTO outputs because it has to do with blockers and the exact hands combinations that a computer is reshoving it with. And so, no, I wouldn't be doing that. And I'll be explaining later, these ranges aren't meant to be blindly be followed, but the properties of these ranges should be followed. So the general property of raising your best, so you're raising a polarized range and shoving a linear range. So, Andres Ortega asks, how short do you have to be for under the gun 1, under the gun and under the gun 1 jams, some jams? Like 8 big blinds, do we still open 2 big blinds to ace jack? No, I would say there's not a general rule of thumb around 10 big blinds. There's definitely hands you want to start open shoving, but 15 I think is a little too much. When you get down to like 12, I implement my own strategy like this under the gun at like 12 big blinds. So I'll open shove with like, 6s through 10s. I'll raise with jacks through aces, ace king, ace queen. I'll raise. I'll shove my ace jack, and then I'll have some raise folds in there as well. So I'll kind of make my own raise fold, raise call, and open shove range as well. I'm trying to generate as much EV as I can. So Julie asks a very good question, and this is kind of the reverse property I've been talking about. Julie asks, in the hijack, why are we shoving ace queen off and not king queen off? So very good question. And in the hijack, the reason we want to, we're going to shove with ace queen off is we get a lot of the hands that call us are going to be weaker aces. So when we shove with ace queen offsuit in the hijack, hands like ace jack suited, ace 10 suited, ace 9 suited, ace 10 offsuit, those hands are all calls. And we're going to get called by hands that dominate us. The reason we're going to min raise with king queen, and king queen has one of these properties is, and again, you see some things with like in the hijack, we're min raising cutoff. With king queen off, it's hard for us to shove for 15 big blinds and get called by a hand that we dominate. So, for example, when we shove, hands like king jack and king 10, queen jack are going to fold. We'd rather just raise the 2 big blinds and let those hands call the 2 big blind raise or reshove themselves so that we keep in hands that we dominate. So the key point here is we want to keep in hands that we dominate and kick out the hands that dominate us. I hope that answers the question, Julie. Just king queen. We want to keep in those weaker kings and weaker queens, especially when the big blind is going to call us with, if we raise the 2 big blinds, the big blind's going to call with king 5 suited, for example, and that's really good for us when we get to play post flop. Alexander asks, if we never have the nutted hands in our open shoving ranges, won't we get called lighter? No, and you're supposed to get quieter. The problem is you don't shove with pocket kings. The reason is you generate EV by raising to 2 big blinds with pocket kings and playing post flop, or letting people shove all in with you with pocket fives, or maybe they fold pocket fives if you go all in for 15 big blinds. The thing with the GTO strategy is it's always going to do whatever is the most profitable with whatever hand. So it's playing to the max exploit that it can against itself, and it's always going to be more profitable to just raise with this polarized range of your really strong hands, and then you're going to shove with your middle hands, and you're shoving some of your offsuit aces, you're shoving some of your suited broadways, you're shoving some pairs. There's no specific hand they can call you with that's like exploiting you in terms of this range is generated to generate the maximum EV possible with all hands. So I covered some of the points on those hands. I want to point out some points here with push fold that a lot of people are interested with. And I think it was Andres that asked about, I was talking about 12 big blinds under the gun. So this is the push fold chart from the same tool section on pokercoaching.com. You guys have access to it. So what this is 12 big blinds, small blind, button, cutoff, hijack, all options, and what hands you could probably just go all in with. That's what it means. It's more to go all in than it is to fold. So it's better for you to just go all in than it is to fold these hands. But what it doesn't show you is what's the maximum EV. It just shows you what's plus EV. So, for example, at 12 big blinds under the gun, like Andres we were about, we can profitably shove with fives plus, ace nine, ace five suited, ace jack off, king 10 suited, king queen off, queen 10 suited, jack 10 suited. What I probably would do with my range is I might fold, I'd probably open shove maybe with, fives and sixes, maybe even sevens, eights possibly. I'd start raising with nines or better, maybe tens or better. I'd raise fold like ace nine suited, shove with like, actually, we can just shove with ace nine suited, ace 10 suited, raise call with our aces. Basically, all I'm going to take the worst hands here, or the lowest EV shoves, like they might only be worth like 0.01 big blinds. They're just barely profitable. Just raise those hands to 2 big blinds, which makes it slightly more profitable because we're only risking big blinds instead of 12 big blinds. And then I'd balance that by raising with the hands like aces, kings, queens, ace, king, ace, queen, and then shove all the middle hands like queen 10 suited, king 10 suited, jack 10 suited. The hands that I'll feel kind of gross raising and then having to fold to a shove. So key point here, don't blindly fall in love with these push fold charts. They show you a plus EV basic strategy, but they're far from the maximum EV, and you're losing money by playing this strategy. So we already covered that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cover some examples from tournaments I've played that will hopefully help explain what I'm talking about a little bit more. So we're going to pull up our trusty poker tracker, and we're going to simply start by going through some hands and seeing what's going on. And what we're going to do is get to my decision, and then I'm going to ask you guys, would you guys either raise fold the specific hand, raise call, or open shove? And obviously there's variables about like the opponents, which player is shoving against us, but we're talking about in general, what would be our general strategy with this hand. So this first example would be kind of one. This is at a final table with 6 left, 550K. So we got like about 17 big blinds here in the cutoff. With queen 10 offsuit, is this a hand that we should be raising to 2 big blinds, or should we be going all in with? And if we raise to 2 big blinds, will this be a hand that we're going to fold, or will we be calling an all in versus these 2 shorter stacks? So it seems like everyone's getting this back. That's why I started with this one. This one's pretty easy. We're going to go on ace with queen 10 off. And a good result here. We just steal the blinds. The big blind calls. Good thing our hand's pretty good. And what types of hands are you going to call with? He could call us with, he's going to call us with queen 8 suited, 7 suited, queen 5 suited, 10 8 suited, 10 7 suited. Plus with a lot of hands dominate. Now, if we flop a pair that we dominate, this is going to be a really great spot because we're going to double up now with queen 10. If he has queen 5 suited and the flop comes queen 9 4. So that's great for us. And this hand is a clear open. And I see a lot of really tight players fold this hand. And you're losing money by folding this hand because it is a very, very profitable open raise. There's only 3 players left to act, and they're not going to pick up a hand strong enough to play back at you to not make queen 10 off a profitable open. So, no, this is the next. Sorry, these hands got out of order. So we'll just do it this way. So, ace 5 offsuit here. It's going to fold to us on the button. We have 16 big blinds. The small blind has 12 big blinds. Big blind has about 18 big blinds. Should we go all in, raise the 2 big blinds, and then if we raise the 2 big blinds, should we fold or call? So I picked this one specifically because I'm getting a bunch of different answers. Some people are saying raise then fold. Some people are saying all in. And so this is going to be an important point. And this is where the feel part comes in. So I'm going to give some details now about these 2 players. And I'm going to see if it will change your answers. So this is at a final table. Okay. We're not going to consider ICM. Let's forget about the ICM concept here. The small blind is a very weak, tight player. Okay, he's very weak and tight, and the big blind was a competent player who played a decent post flop. Now, what would that change your strategy to either raise fold, or would it change it to going all in? So, I think this is a kind of middling spot here. I have 16 big blinds. I think if I had 13 big blinds, I'd shove. I felt that with my skill edge and this being a very weak type player, meaning he's going to be playing way too tight in the small blind and not going in enough, I think exploitably going for a raised fold I felt was a better option than going all in. Also, and I haven't talked about this yet, and I'll bring up this exploit. Players in the big blind, they tend to call way more than they go all in. And so the big blind tends to not reshove wide enough. And they tend to just call because they're getting such a good price. And they should call a lot because of their good price. But sometimes they just automatically call because they know it's plus EV, even though going all in might be higher EV. For example, a hand like Queen 9 suited is probably a better all in than a call. Or there's some hands that are better all ins, and we'll talk about it in the next section when we get to facing a raised person. So I exploitably went for a raised fold because I didn't think either of these players would rejam wide enough, and I generate more EV by just raising to 2 big blinds than by shoving. I did get shoved on here, and I folded my hand. I'm not raised calling with this hand. Definitely not a raised call. And potentially I got outplayed by the big blind, but I think more so it's potentially that I could have saved my stack potentially because I'm assuming this is going to be a pretty strong hand when the big blind goes all in. So I raised folded, and I think Jason says what exactly Exactly. Jason said, I don't think I get the same folds with the 2x raise. I definitely get called more. The thing is I get called, I think, by the same range that when I shove, that rejams. So I just think on a lot of points against weaker players, a lot of times you're going to generate more EV by raise folding than shoving for two reasons. One, they're going to make more mistakes post flop, and they're going to overfold to your 2x raise. And second, you let them not make a mistake when you shove. So when you shove, they're just going to fold queen 9 offsuit. When you raise to 2x, now if they fold queen 9 offsuit, they're making a huge mistake because they should call you with queen 9 offsuit for your 2x raise. So always be thinking about, what is my opponent going to make a bigger mistake against? Are they going to make a bigger mistake against the all-in, or are they going to be making a bigger mistake against the min raise? Always be thinking about that. Getting your opponent to make the biggest mistake. So, Richard, obviously ICM is going to affect a lot of these things, but if you're interested about the ICM, I would recommend checking out my webinar from a couple of weeks ago I did on ICM. We're just talking about chip EV all today. We're not discussing really any ICM today. So let's get to the next hand. Okay. So with this hand, we have about 16 big blinds, an ace-jack offsuit. Will we be raise folding, raise calling, or going all in? So I see a lot of all-ins. I see a lot of raise calls, a decent amount of raise folds. Can we open fold this? Yes, Jason, obviously it matters who goes all in. But so here in this hand, I think it's a very clear min raise. I don't have any open jamming range here for 15 big blinds. Again, for the same thing, I don't want to be risking 16 big blinds when I have 8 other players. To be honest, I want to be playing as many hands as possible because I'm playing a hand because it's plus EV to play. And so I can play more hands when I'm min raising. So I don't do any open jamming for 15 big blinds here in early position. And I would probably raise fold this to almost all players. And the reason is that most players are going all in with pretty tight ranges. Potentially against like the small blind or the big blind or the button, it could get close to being a raise call, but they need to be reshoving with hands like ace 10 and jack 10 suited and ace 5 suited for it to become a raise call, and most players aren't doing that. So I raise, we call, and we end up playing a pot against the big blind. This isn't a post-flop video, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next hand. This hand, I think, is going to be a good example. So, in this hand, we are under the gun 8. So under the gun +1, we have just under 15 big blinds, and we have ace 10 suited. What should we be doing with this hand? So a lot of people open shove, and I want to give that reminder. When we're in early position, we're not going to be doing a lot of open shoving. Kind of not until we get to the low jack is really where we start open shoving some hand, the low jack and the hijack. So Lewis says he's open full. I think that's a little tight. I think this is a hand we have to be playing. I'm going to min raise here, and then we'll see what happens in this hand. This is a very, very clear min raise for me. I'm never shoving. So again, remember, people are going to make bigger mistakes with your min raise than they are against your open shove, and that's good for you. In this hand, we min raise, and now the cutoff goes all in. Would you guys call this all in, or would you fold? Some people saying fold, some People saying call, kind of a mix. So this is why I picked this hand. I think this is very, very close. So I ended up folding here, and we're going to go back to the PowerPoint, and I have the IC miser output for you guys to show you, because this is a very close spot. So in this ace 10 suited hand, using the Jonathan Little implementable ranges, we get this kind of an output. So in the Jonathan Little ranges, okay, so the same ranges that I showed you earlier. So from under the gun under the gun plus 1, this is the range we should be raising with. So I put this range into ICMizer. And if you also go to these 15 big blind ranges, this is the range cutoff should be shoving against under the gun. So against under the gun in a GTO setting. Now, not everyone is playing this strategy. Ace queen off or better, ace 10 suited or better, king 10 suited or better, queen jack suited, and sevens are better. These are the hands the cutoff should be going all in against under the gun. Maybe he goes all in a little bit wider versus under the gun. So in this situation, hero calls after under the gun raise and cutoff push. Ace 10 suited is making 0.05 big blinds. That's not very much. Versus, you see a big jump, like ace queen offsuit is making 1.42 big blinds and pocket nines. You can see there's big jumps between certain hands, and it has to do with hands that dominate. With ace 10 suited, the only hand we dominate is king 10 suited. So we only dominate 3 other combos of hands. Versus when we have ace jack suited, this is why ace jack suited is a much more profitable call. It's worth, 18 times as much, 17 times as much, because we dominate ace 10 suited, we dominate king jack suited, and we dominate queen jack suited. Okay? So, and then ace queen is even more so because we dominate all his queen X, queen jack suited. Now you may ask, some players are shoving tighter than this. Well, if he's shoving tighter than this, then ace 10 suited is losing a lot of money. But I didn't put the screenshot here, but I said if cutoff adds ace offsuit, king queen offsuit, jack 10 suited, ace 5 suited, which are reasonable hands that he could be going all in with. Ace jack, king queen, jack 10, ace 5 suited, and then I added pocket 6s and pocket 5s. That's another 3% of hands where he's now jamming 11%. Ace 10 suited is now plus 1.1 big blinds, which is a clear call. In summary, we need him to jam hands we dominate to make this a call. We need him to be jamming hands like jack 10 suited, ace 5 suited, maybe ace 8 suited, ace 7 suited. He needs to be jamming these hands that we dominate, 10-9 suited, jack 10 suited, in order for it to be a call. That's why ace jack suited is a clear call, because we dominate more of his shoving range. Alexander asks, what if we get min clicked or otherwise very small 3-bets that's not a jam on these stacks? Are we always 4-bet jamming or folding, or can we have some flats? I'd probably mostly flat call, because we'd be getting an extremely good price, unless it's the type of player where you know it's exclusively pocket aces. So, any questions on this ICMizer output for the ace 10 suited on why we are raise folding it and not raise calling with it? Now, obviously, it sucks that we have to fold a hand as strong as ace 10 suited, but we're going to get called too. We're not always going to get shoved on. Sometimes he's going to flat with jack 10 suited, which he would fold to our all in. He's flat with queen suited that he would fold to his all. The reason we min raise is because it generates more EV than open shoving itself. If I know the villain has aces, I'll fold to a min raise and rather would call the hand like 10-9 suited or 9-8 suited or like pocket 8s, a hand that can flop better against pocket aces. Yep. So Sandy makes a really great point, and this is why we don't just open shove ace 10 suited. Players at lower stakes are often shoving very tight ranges anyways. That's why we should raise fold instead of just going all in ourselves. We generate more EV because they fold too much. They are playing too tight against our two big blind raise, or they call with hands that are worse than ours now, and we get to play post flop with them. So David asked, while in play, how do you keep all this? So I practice this stuff a lot, and that's how I'm able to make adjustments on the fly. I knew the ace-10 suited was close. I actually felt pretty good. It was a really loose, aggressive regular. So there's a chance he was shoving these ace-jack, king-queen hands. So there's a chance I made a big mistake or a smaller. Seeing this where at the worst case it's probably a 0.05, I would probably call because it's probably closer to something like this than it is something like this. So in summary, raise more hands, split your ranges, focus on hands with blockers for your raise fold, so ace X and king X, and don't be open raising hands like 7-6 suited that have no blockers. This is the key point to what we just talked about in this 8 suited hand. Our raise call range is very dependent on opponent's shoving range. We can raise fold a ton versus tight rejammers. We are not getting exploited if they're rejamming really tight, fold a bunch. They are exploiting themselves by playing too tight, and they overfold pre-flop and allow us to realize our equity and allow us to raise more hands because of how tight they're playing. And then finally, don't chicken out by just open shoving. Focus on maximizing your EV. And also, if you're trying to get a lot better at poker, don't be scared to get yourself into tougher spots. Yeah, you might get into some tricky post-flop spots, but you're going to develop into a better poker player and generate more EV in the long run by playing this split strategy and doing much more min raising rather than just open jamming for 15 to 20 big blinds, still in early position. Any other questions really quick before I raise first in, before we move facing a raise first in? All right. So Matthew says, I don't consider open shoving chicking it out. It risks your tournament life. Yes, it does risk your tournament out. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is people open shove in spots they know it's plus EV rather than looking for what's the highest EV scenario. So now we're going to talk about facing a raise first in. So this is when raise first in, we're now in position of that regular who had the decision to either fold, call, or go all in. We're no longer the first person raising into the pot. So, biggest mistakes. First, people don't read enough. They play way too tight, ball in wide enough, and they allow the overraiser to reel too much equity. Call much with small pairs and weak suited pairs. They flat too much early middle position, and they choose the wrong types of hand to jam. So, rejamming 101. Said live by 2 rules. It's kind of 3 rules, but I put it as 2B. So when deciding to flat call or go all in, first question, will hand dominate, call my all in? So for example, when you go all in with ace king, will ace queen, will ace jack, you want to shove with hands that will still get dominated hands to call. Will hands that dominate me fold to my all in? And then 2B, will hands with high equity fold to my all in? 2B here has to do a lot with when you have small pairs. So going all in with pocket fives, for example, is a really good decision a lot of the times because you get hands like, the reason shove a hand like pocket fives has much higher V than flat calling is because you can get a hand like jack 10, queen jack, ace 10. You get a bunch of hands with 2 overcards to just fold. And that's a really good outcome for you. So denying equity is really important when you're going all in. That's the main reason that you are going all in a lot of situations. We're denying equity to the player that raised pre-flop. So for example, in our ace-10 suited hand, we raised, the player went all in. Maybe he had a hand like pocket nines. If he showed us pocket nines, we're supposed to call because we're getting the lay the right price and we're in a 50-50 coin flip or whatever, we're 45%. We're supposed to call based on the pot odds we're getting when we have ace-10 suited and he goes all in with pocket nines. So he's forcing us to make a mistake by denying us our equity to realize our equity there with ace-10 suited. That's reason number one we want to go all in pre-flop. Number two is denying equity to the remaining players post-flop. So let's go back to this example right here. Let's say this player, Big Witty here, has, let's say he has a hand like King Queen suited, okay? Going to be a hand that he's probably going to go all in pre-flop with. And the main reason is he's not worried about just denying our equity here that raised pre-flop. He's worried about denying equity from these three players behind him. So, if he flat calls with the King Queen suited, now maybe Gambler 8 calls with 7-6 suited. Maybe Hello Man comes into the pot with 9-7 suited, and they flop top pair now. And the flop comes like 9-5-3. And instead of just winning the pot pre-flop with the King Queen suited, he's created a spot where he's allowed more people to enter the pot, and it's harder for him to realize his equity. A better example would be like, let's say he has pocket eights, and now he allows Hello Man, my man, to come into the pot with Queen Jack offsuit. Versus if he goes all in with pocket eights, Queen Jack offsuit's going to fold now. And so denying equity to the players behind us, and when we look at the GTO charts in a second from Jonathan from Poker Coaching, you're going to see that we don't do a lot of flatting in early position. We only start flatting in later position for this reason. We have so many players behind us that we want to deny equity to. So, again, like let's say the cutoff opens, we just flat call with ace jack offsuit on the button instead of going all in. Now the big blind can call with 7-6 suited, for example, and realize equity. So it's about denying equity when we go all in pre-flop. So let's look at some 15 big blind ranges now. We're talking about pre-flop right now, David. So similar situations here. So you see all the different positions. The key thing I want to point off is these first 5 range here, you don't see any blue, which is calling. So in a GTO setting, we are never going to flat call from any position that's not the button with less than 15 big blinds. And the main reason we're not going to do that is we want to deny equity to players behind us and not let them come into the pot and play in a multi-way pot on a short SPR. All right, you have a great day, Julie. Thanks for joining. In reality, I don't play this exact strategy, but that's the principles behind that. It's about denying equity. So in the cutoff, the hijack, or in early position, a computer playing this strategy is only going to go all in or fold when someone else has raised the pot in front of us. And a pretty linear range. Eights are better, queen, ace 10. Pretty similar throughout. Where it starts to change is on the button, and you start to see some different things, like it's starting to flat some of its weaker hands, and it's always starting to flat call now with pocket aces. Aces are flatting, now it's just flat calling with king jack suited, king 10, queen 10, jack 10. Just a few hands, it's calling with only 4% of hands, but still pretty strong hands. And like I said before, it's not calling with any 7-6 suited, 7-6, 6-5, 8-7 suited, button versus cutoff, no suited connectors at all. And just doing a little bit of calling with 5s and 4s and 3s. That's kind of weird. It's just mostly a blocker thing. So these charts are all on the Poker Coaching on the tools. Let's see this question. So, Matt, these are all when the effective stack is 15 bands. Now, I don't follow these charts exactly. I do some flatting in the cutoff versus a low jackal. And the reason I do flat is because the players behind me typically play way too tight. So when I flat call in the cutoff, the reason this strategy doesn't show any flat on the cutoff is because players on the button, small blind and big blind playing this strategy are going to play very aggressive be doing a lot of shoving where A, you won't get to see the flop when you flat call, or B, they're going to be doing a lot of calling and you're not denying their equity. Now, in reality, that doesn't happen as much because people do play way too tight, and so you can do some flat calling with the weaker parts of these ranges. I tend to do that, and I also tend to flat call a little bit more with some of my stronger hands pre-flop on like these shorter stacks as well. Out of position when we're in the small blind. For example, the small blind versus like cutoff and bit button ranges is only going all in or folding because it doesn't want to induce action from the big blind and deny the equity from the big blind. That's why it's playing a strategy like this. And then what else do I want to point out here? Pretty much the small blind is just shoving with pretty much all its really good high equity hands. We don't need to talk about specific hands here because you guys have access to all these charts. Some notes on some of these things I want to point out. I talked about this in early position. We're doing almost zero flatting with 15 big blinds. We don't want to allow others to realize their equity. Exploitably, I talked about this. I think we can flat some because players play way tight. I also want to point out hands like 10-9 suited, 9-8 suited, Jack-8 suited, just getting folded. Maybe these are the types of hands you can flat exploitably, but King, Queen, 10 suited being folded. We are folding a lot of those hands. So, good question. Why does the small blind have a lot of flats versus the under the gun player, none versus the late position player? Does someone want to answer that? Let's see if someone in the chat can figure out that. So why does the small blind have, I'll pull up the small blind chart. Why does the small blind have a lot of flats versus under the gun? So small blind versus under the gun has a lot of flats, but versus the cutoff and the button, only shoving. Why is that the case? Yep, so a few people got it right. The reason we flat more versus under the gun is because of how strong the under the gun raise first in range is. And so we don't want to be shoving that wide into an under the gun shoving range. We get a flat call a lot more hands versus the under the gun is because there's only one other player left to act. So it's very likely we get to see the flop still when we call. And we can call with some more of these speculative hands because we're going to see the flop. Now versus the button and the cutoff, these players are raising with wide ranges and have a wide raise fold gap. So we're just going to shove because A, we get called wider, so all our hands have more equity when we get called, and B, it's more likely we generate a fold when the cutoff has raised. So we're shoving hands like Queen 9, Jack 9, King 9 suited, small blind versus cutoff, Ace 9, Ace 7 or better. This is against someone that's raising wide enough in the cutoff. Now, I don't think people open raise wide enough, so I'm not shoving with all of these hands because people don't raise wide enough. But against players who do raise wide enough, you definitely do want to be shoving wide. So other notes, once we are in the late position, so those ranges only show the button. I think the cutoff, you can even get away with it in the hijack. We can start flatting parts of our range because we have less people to act and we're not worried as much about denying equity. And in the small blind, we can rejam wider in the small blind since we only have one player left to pick up a hand. So the later position you are, the more hands you get to play. And the later position you are, the more hands you get to shove because it's less likely. You're not worried just about who open raise calling you. You're also worried about someone behind you picking up a hand. Here's a couple of 20 big blind examples. So those were 15 big blinds. So this is a 20 big blind cutoff versus hijack. And again, the same type of problems are going to apply here when we shove for 20 big blinds. So on the tools site on poker coaching, it has 15 big blind and 25 big blind. I have 20 big blind here. These are from my ranges. I am loving with like 7s through queens, a lot of my medium pairs, a lot of my suited broadways, the ace king, ace queen, ace jack. And then I do a lot of calling with the weaker parts of my range. And then I'm also always calling with like aces and kings. So I'm calling with some really, really strong hands, and flatting with some speculative hands as well. Now, why would I shove a hand like ace 9 suited and flat with a hand like ace 10 suited? Again, this is versus a hijack open. So this is, I've talked about this concept a couple times. Why am I shoving with ace 9 suited versus I am calling with ace 10 and ace jack suited? Jason hit it there. So ace 9 suited, I am targeting ace 10 and ace jack and trying to get ace 10 and ace jack to fold. So actually, the hijack, so if you're going by my ranges, in the hijack, the worst hands I open are all the offsuit 10x hands. So in the hijack, I'm opening jack 10 off, queen 10 off, king 10 off. And I'm not opening king 9, queen 9, jack 9, 10 9. So I'm shoving with ace 9 suited to get a hand like ace 10 off the fold. And I'm also not blocking. The weakest hands that I'm raised folding are like these jack 10, queen 10, king 10. So in general, as a general rule of thumb, this is kind of a complicated topic, but as a general rule, you're going to shove with the kicker that's right below the worst hands that the position opens. So in the hijack, the worst hands that theoretically they should be opening are these offsuit king 10, queen 10, jack 10. So I don't want to shove with a 10 in my hand because those are the hands that are folding. And when I shove with ace 9 suited, ace 10 offsuit should be, so I'm getting a dominated hand to fold. And I want to flat with ace jack suited because ace 10 is folding when I shove, and I want to keep ace 10 in the pot. And I shove with ace queen because now ace jack is calling when I shove. So hopefully you guys, please ask in the chat if you don't understand that concept. We shove ace 9 to get ace 10 to fold. We flat ace 10 to keep ace 9 from folding. And we flat ace jack to keep ace 10 and ace 9. And then we finally start shoving ace queen because now ace jack is calling our all in. So it's kind of a progression of, again, you want to shove with hands that fold out dominated hands. And for example, ace 5 suited. We want to shove with ace 5 suited because we get ace 6, ace 7, ace 8, ace 9, ace 10 to all fold. And that's really, really good for us. This is, that's why I said at the beginning, let me go back to that slide. Three rules. Where'd that slide go? This one. Will hands I dominate call my all-in? Will hands that dominate me fold to my all-in? And will hands with high equity fold to my all-in? So those are the three rules and kind of how those ranges are generated. Now let's look at under the gun 1 plus under the gun. So very, very tight ranges. For under the gun opens, we're under the gun 1 with 20 big blinds. I shove with ace off, ace king suited, and then I also shove with queen jack suited, king jack, king queen, and then like 10s through queens, and then I flat with aces and kings. I flat with ace jack, queen jack, and some of these weaker suited broadways suited aces. Again, queen jack suited. I shove with queen jack suited because I'm getting a hand like ace jack offsuit to fold. I can get king queen to fold when I shove with queen jack suited. And then also I get a hand like pocket 8s to fold when I shove with queen jack suited, or pocket 9s potentially to fold. That's really good for me. King jack has the same property. And then we flat with these aces and kings kind of to protect our shoving range, and we shove with these high equity hands that are kind of in the middle. That's under the gun 1 plus under the gun. Exploits and adjustments, and then we'll give examples, and then we will wrap up the webinar here in the next 10 minutes. So, who is left to act? And this exploits and adjustments is what I talk about, the feel part of this, because this is massive. And I don't want you guys to blindly copy those ranges that I just showed you. Those are kind of a baseline. And you want to work off your exploits and your adjustments. For who is left to act? Tight, passive players. If everyone is tight and passive, so for example, when I raised the ace-5 off, when I just raised folded instead of going all in because I felt the small blind was very tight passive. It's the opposite of this. So when you have tight players behind you, the EV of flat calling goes up because you're less likely to get squeezed, you're more likely to see the flop, and it's less likely they're going to call behind and you play a multi-way pot. If you have aggressive rejammers or 3-betters behind you, the EV of flat calling goes down. You're going to get jammed on and you're going to see the flop less often, and you're just wasting 2 big blinds more often by calling. Stack sizes. How many rejam stacks are still left to act? How many people behind you have between 10 and 20 big blinds and have the option to just kind of go all in pre-flop? The more rejam stacks you have, the tighter you play. These ranges I showed you are assuming everyone has the same stack size. So that's like the tightest you should be. Who is the opener? What range is the player opening? So this is really important. I just wrote an article on this, why you need to know your own pre-flop ranges. So if the player is opening tighter than GTO, so for example, I open about 18% of hands under the gun. Okay. If I think the player, either through my HUD or my observations, is opening tighter than that, I need to tighten my rejam range. If he's opening looser than that, I'm going to widen my rejam range. These are very, very simple adjustments, but people get these. Which range is the player calling with? If he calls too tight, shove with more hands like Jack 10 suited and weaker suited aces like Ace 5, and flat with more hands like Ace Queen, that if he's not going to call you with Ace Jack, then call and keep in as Ace Jack, and jam with more hands like Jack 10 suited and King Jack suited. So you can jam more, just adjust what type of hands you jam. If he calls too wide, shove your normal range because the EV goes up since you have more equity. Everything is based off of adjustments and exploits, and everything I showed you is a baseline. Let's go to examples really quick because we're running out of time. So let's go back to Poker Tracker, and let's start right here. All right, so in our first hand, we're on the button with Ace Queen offsuit. We have 14 big blinds. And the low jack opens to 2.2 big blinds. Should we fold, call, or go all in? Most people, I think, are on the same page with me. A few people are saying call, but I think this is a very easy all in, especially with the offsuit combos. You're more likely to just want to go all in because they don't play quite as well post flop. And so Ace Queen is a very easy all in here on the button. Ace Jack would start to be close where we can maybe consider flatting, but I think Ace Queen is a very easy all in. We do get reshoved on behind by Ace King, but we get lucky and win the pot. That's not the important part. Do this hand. All right, we have pocket eights here. The button cut off higher. Low jack min raises to 2,000, and we are in the small blind with 13,000 in pocket eights. Should we fold? Should we call, or should we go all in? Yep, this one's a pretty easy one. We reshove. Again, we want to fold out hands like Jack 10, Queen Jack, Ace 10, Ace Jack. We want to fold out a lot of these hands that have 2 overcards to us. So these small pairs, medium pairs, and we also don't want the big blind to call with Jack 10 off. We don't even want the big blind to call with King 5 because you could hit a king on the flop. So we just wanted to take this pot now. We end up shoving with 2 8s. We get called by Ace Jack and win a flip. Pretty good result for us. Where's the next one? Replay hand. Okay. In this hand, we have the button cut off hijack, min raising. We are in the big blind with about 15 big blinds. Should we call, fold or go all in with ace-8 here? Okay. Most people are getting this right. I would call here. I think this is a very standard call. I would start going all in. Ace-Queen for sure is an all in, and Ace-Jack is player dependent. Ace-Jack is pretty player dependent. You can flatter call with Ace-Jack. So I think this is an easy flat call. We're not worried about the post flop in this scenario. Let's get a couple more in here. Yeah, he is opening into a short stack, but we're just getting such a good price with a hand that can flop well. So we can flop, obviously a top pair, even against, if he has kings, queens, jacks, we have enough equity to peel the min raise with our ace in our hand. All right, so this one here, the button's going to raise. We are in the big blind with about 18 big blinds. Should we call? I'm not even going to say fold. If anyone says fold in the chat, they're going to have to leave the webinar. Or should we go all in? Oh, I'll make this bigger. Sorry. Yep. I think most people get this one. We're going to think this is a strong enough hand that we're going to want to go all in with. We can get called by king queen. We can get called by in theory, you're supposed to call with like king 10 suited here. Not that I think a lot of people do. We can get called by ace 9, ace 8. Some people call ace 7. We can also deny equity. Our hand is just too strong here to not go all in. If we had a weaker suited ace, like maybe ace 6 suited, I would consider flatting. But ace 10 suited versus a late position is too strong of a hand to just flat call. Okay. This one. All right. Here we are facing an under the gun raise. We have ace queen off and 12 big blinds. Should we fold, call, or go all in? Yep. I think most people are. I'll get to that in a second, Sandy. That question. Yep. I think this is an easy shove. Remember, versus an early position, we're not going to be doing much flatting because we want to deny equity to the other 7 players here. So we have a pretty easy shove. And we do get called behind by 4s, which is pretty crazy. But, yep, that was a good all-in there. We got 2 or 3 more here. This one, I remember this one. So, under the gun opens, and we are here with ace 9 suited in the button cutoff hijack in the low jack with about 16 big blinds. Should we fold, call, or go all in? So I see a lot of people saying fold. I think this is close between a call and an all. And this is one of those spots that I'm going to deviate from what the GTO strategy says. If we look at the, let's look at the charts that I was showing you earlier. 15 big blinds. Yeah, sorry, let me move this and find the right slide. We were like low jack. So we have hijack versus under the gun. So hijack versus under the gun. Ace 9 suited is not a shove. It's the first hand we're not going all in with. And for the exploits I mentioned before, that I think people play too tight. I think we can call and play this hand profitably because we're not going to get reshoved on enough by players behind, and they're going to play way too tight. And we can play this ace 9 suited as a flat call, in my opinion. So I like flat calling here. I think it's just strong. I think it's strong enough to flat call, but not strong enough to shove versus the all-in player. Remember, we're calling this is a little more than a min raise now, but I still think we, because of that exploit that I talked about, I don't mind calling here. And we do get 3-bet here, and now we have a pretty easy fold now. But I think it's just not going to happen wide enough that people are just not going to pick up a hand, or they're not going to play enough hands. And this guy's opening ace-10 off. So this is a hand that we would have gotten probably a fold from if we did go all in. But we would have ran into kings. So I do like a flat call there with the ace-9 suited. This one, this is a final table. Let's ignore the ICM part of it. We have about 17 big blinds here. Ace-jack offsuit on the button. Cutoff opens. Should we fold, call, or go all in? Yep, I like the all in a lot. This is way too strong of a hand to just flat call here versus a cutoff range that should be pretty wide. I think we got an easy all in. We did get called and ran into the ace-queen, but that's something that's going to happen. It's going to happen, but I think all in is definitely a higher EV play than calling. So, how is it here? Let's start to wrap this up. Let me delete some of these. I'm going to go back to some of these questions that I skipped over that I want to address. And then I think I have one more, two more. So, just the feel side versus raise versus in. I think I've kind of explained this to you guys, and you kind of heard some of my exploits and explanations. For example, the ace-9 suited. Lots of experiences needed to maximize EV. You need to have a good feel for population calling ranges versus rejams. I think people are too tight. They call too tight. Population open raising ranges off of 15 big blinds, they're way too tight. They don't raise enough hands. So population raise fold gap is normally less than a GTO. So I think high pressure situations play a role. Players are more likely to make bigger folds in high pressure spots. For example, final 2 tables near the money in a big tournament. How to get good at spots. I've talked about it before. ICMizer, Hold'em calculator. You should be using these every day. Analyze the ranges and then adjust each range. What if I had 17 big blinds instead of 15? What if the player is opening 20% of hands instead of 17%? Learn the variable and the adjustments that come from them. By learning the variables, you will learn to adjust to situations. So, I'm going to open up to questions right now for a few minutes, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this up. So if you have any questions, Sandy, just to be clear. So if someone is raised before us, Sandy, we will be going all in. But if no one has raised, then yes, we want to min raise with our strongest hands and our weakest hands, and we're going to shove with the middle of our range. So it depends if someone's in the pot already, our strategy. So Matthew made a good point on the ace-9 suited that I want to talk about. He said we are not deep enough to flush mine with the ace-9 suited. That is correct. We're not playing our hand for the flush value. It also has good value for a 9 or an ace is going to flop top pair a lot of the time. And we also are going to get to play in position potentially against the raiser. A lot of things can still happen that are very good for us. They're going to generate EV rather than just shoving. Oh, Andrea, you'll be able to see the replay if you missed this. It should be on the Poker Coaching website tomorrow. So you'll get to watch a replay of it. So, Jim asked a good question. Matt, in a previous example, the ace-queen off, the under the gun is linear. Was the min raise why we shoved? If under the gun jammed, are you folding? If the under the gun had jammed, it would depend on his range against... if it was just him, like if we're in the big blind, I would for sure call, but I would probably fold the ace-queen because of all the people left to act. When he min raises, there's just more money in the pot for us to steal. It really depends how wide he's jamming from under the gun. Any other questions before we wrap this up? Andrew, I appreciate you showing up. All right, we're going to wrap it up. I will see you guys next week. keep a lookout on the schedule. There's a chance I'm moving my webinars to Mondays at the same time. I haven't made that final yet, but there's a chance my webinars might be moving to Monday. So keep a look at the schedule if you want to see my webinar next week. And I will talk to you guys later. Thank you, Al. I appreciate the comment. You guys have a great weekend.